Hello there, it's Cassie. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Today I have the February 2019 Brutus Monroe Inspiration Box. It's no longer available, but some of the items are, so I will link those down below. And I'm not sure when they actually release their kits, but I am definitely going to get my hands on the next one, and I will pay attention a little bit closer to the dates of when those release so that I can pass that information on if that's something that you're interested in. So let's go ahead and take a look at what comes inside this kit. So that's the box. Is that not super adorable? That showed up in my mailbox, and this is the first time opening it. It comes with this little sheet with a picture of everything in the kit, along with that adorable pin. I don't know why, I love it. I'm excited about it. It also comes with this plum aqua pigment, is what it was labeled. And so I'm putting this on my glass mat. I'm going to grab just a piece of watercolor paper and a water brush just to show you what it looks like. So I'll end up doing some watercoloring with it. You will definitely see this. Again, I use it on a couple cards. It's really pretty. It's almost like a purple gray kind of color. Really pretty. Then we're going to move on to the stamp set. And I have to say that I really like the design of Brutus Monroe's images. There's just something about them. They just really grab my eye. They're different, and so as soon as I saw this set, I had to get it, and I'm excited for the next sets to come. This is the first that I own of their stamps, but I'm excited about that. These kits are really jam-packed with stuff. So the next thing we're going to look at are the card panels. There's 8 of them. You can sponge them, you can Copic color on them, you can even foil them, and I do a little bit of all that. Then it also comes with this Brutus embossing folder. It doesn't have a name on it, but it's just solid long stripes. It also comes with a cardstock sampler. There's 14 pieces in here, and there's that glitter paper, and then this lightweight cardstock in various colors, 2 of each of those colors. I end up using those for card bases, even though they are very lightweight. And it also has a couple of star patterned papers as well, which I thought were really pretty. The next thing we'll go ahead and look at are the embellishments that come in this kit. There are a bunch of wax seals in here. They're wax seal stickers, which I thought would be super fun to put on just about any envelope, not just to go along with this kit, but just to have on hand and use. It comes with this ribbon, super pretty. It also comes with these Brutus self-stick gems, which that's a 40-piece pack. There's also a bunch of vellum envelopes, and I will link to an envelope sampler on the website that has 30 pieces in it, which a bunch of vellum ones, and then also these craft ones as well. Let's go ahead and get started on that first card. I'm going to go ahead and get the card panel ready to go, or the card base, which is just going to be that black cardstock. And like I said, this isn't a heavyweight cardstock, but I don't mind because I'm actually going to put some cardstock on the inside and of course on the outside. I trimmed down some of that purple and I'm spraying it with water because this will make it easier to go through your embossing folder to prevent some cracking. There still was a little bit of cracking, but that could be because my machine, I don't know, I have dropped not the machine itself, but I've dropped my plates so many times that there could be something to that. Yeah, because I have to do it on my lap most of the time. And while I have the machine out, I'm going to run that through with the circle nestabilities on that star paper. And then I'm going to just start adhering some of the pieces. I'll go ahead and use some liquid glue on the purple panel. And then I'm going to adhere that down to that black card base. I will put some white cardstock on the inside as well. You don't have to do that, but it will make it a little sturdier. I've got some Strathmore 140-pound watercolor paper that I'm putting in my mini Misty, and I'm going to just line up some of those adorable images onto that watercolor paper because clearly I plan to do some watercoloring. And I'm just trying to figure out the placement. And then once I have that figured out, I will close my door, pick up the stamps, and then I'm going to ink those up with some VersaFine Onyx Black ink. But I am going to use my embossing bag first. Now this next step isn't necessary. You don't have to emboss your images because this ink is waterproof once it dries, but I like the fact that it'll give it a little bit of a raised edge by using clear embossing powder, and then I can color a little bit faster. So typically when you have something wet, you're not going to want to watercolor next to it, but with these raised edges, it'll definitely make it a little bit easier to do so. I don't have to wait so much for things to dry if I want to color right next to it. And so I'm just covering that with some clear embossing powder. And then I will heat that with my heat tool until that is smooth and melted. And like I said, it'll just make it a little bit easier to watercolor a little bit quicker. I would probably want to heat set that anyway, even if I wasn't using the embossing powder, because that is a pigment ink and it does stay wet for a little bit of time. So I flipped my paper, stuck it back in my mini MISTI, and now I am going to stamp my sentiment just on that last little piece. And I'm going to, once again, just so that there's some cohesion, because I don't plan to watercolor over the sentiment, I'm just going to stamp that down with the VersaFine Onyx Black ink, and then I will cover that with some clear embossing powder once again. For my coloring, I have grabbed that plum aqua pigment that came in the kit, and I'm going to start using a water brush and just paint that all over my mailboxes. I love the color. It is like a gray, but it definitely has some purple tones to it, which is probably why they call it plum. But I just love the look of this right there on those mailboxes. And so I'm just going to keep coloring. Normally I don't add the coloring in, but since this was a part of the kit, the aqua pigment, I decided I would show you the coloring. And I'm going to also use some distress inks. I am using the distress inks in the colors, that's Vintage Photo. And I'm also going to use a little bit of the barn door, just for the flags, and a little bit on the mail. I'll also use that Vintage Photo on the mail that is sticking out of the mailbox, just for a little bit of shading. Just add a little bit of depth and dimension. And now that my mailboxes are dry, I'm going to go back over them to add some shadowing with that. So you can definitely layer watercolor if you're unfamiliar with watercoloring. The best way to get your shadowing is to wait till your first layer is dry and then to go back in with a darker layer, which is exactly what I'm doing here. And then that's how you can get your depth and dimension. And I'm going to grab a little bit more of that pigment, and I will just add a little bit more shading on that second one. Got to tell you, I had a lot of fun coloring these like this. And I really love those colors. Then I'm going to heat set that, and I'll just go back over it probably again with another wash, just to make sure that things are the way I want them to look. I'm not actually heating right here, but I'm too lazy to put my gun away. And so I'll just now go back and dry that, and then I'll just keep working until I'm happy. So I've trimmed everything out. Just fussy cut it because it's not a big deal to me, and then I'm just trimming down my sentiment. And now I'll start adhering everything to the card. So I'm going to take that circle panel and adhere that with some liquid glue. And I do want that to stick off the edge, just for some interest. And then I will flip that over, and I'll trim off the excess. And then I'm going to start adhering the rest of the pieces. I'm using foam tape on the sentiment, and I'll use my T-ruler to make sure that I get that straight. And then I'll use liquid glue on the two mailboxes. I end up having to trim down the bottoms. I thought I could stick those underneath, but I had already adhered the sentiment pretty well. So I trimmed down the ends of the little posts. And I'm going to adhere that one a little bit behind that first mailbox as well. And then to attach my little envelopes, I'm going to use just a couple of small pieces of foam tape on the corners and a little bit of liquid glue on the rest of it to make sure that everything is adhered. And once that's down, that is going to finish off the first card. Love that purple. The second card is a pretty easy card, but it packs a lot of punch because I'm doing foiling. And I'm going to use my Amazon Basics laminator, but I let this puppy heat up for probably a good 30-45 minutes before I ran it through. And I'm just running that through with a piece of copy paper folded in half, and it's in between there. And I put the foil right over the top of the panel, and that was one of the card panels that came in the kit. And then I will peel that back, and oh, it's so pretty. I love it. And this foil that I'm using is actually the Gina K Fancy Foils, and I will link that down below if that's something that you're interested in. So for my card base, I'm just going to use that blue that came in the kit. Again, this cardstock is not a heavy weight, but I don't mind. And so I'm going to just set that off to the side and start getting the rest of the elements ready. And so I'm trimming down some of that ribbon, and then I'm going to stamp my sentiment. I screwed up on the first one, so I'm doing the second one where I just put the embossing buddy right over the top of my black cardstock that I just had sitting in my stash, and inked that up with Versamark ink, and then covered that with white embossing powder, and then I'm just heating that till that is smooth and melted. And then I will trim that down, and then I'll start adhering all of the pieces. I'm just going to use a little washi tape on the back to adhere my ribbon. So I will stick that down on the back, and then I'll wrap the back part around, or the other part around as well, and I'll just use another piece of washi tape to adhere that to the back. It's not going to be a big deal because nobody's going to see it. And then I will use some craft, or just like some craft tacky glue, some liquid glue to adhere that to my card base. And that'll make sure that that ribbon stays put. For my sentiment, I ended up trimming down the panel just a little bit more, gave it a little bit of a funky notch there, a little bit slanted, and I covered that with foam tape. And then I'm going to use my T-ruler to make sure that that is stuck down. And that'll actually finish off the second card. So easy, huh? I really like the way that turned out. Card number 3 is a fun one because I'm going to do some background building. I want to build a scene. And so I have a piece of Strathmore 140-pound watercolor paper that I am taping down to a hardboard. And I'm just using some blue painter's tape with that. I'm going to grab out that plum aqua pigment, and I'm going to just slap down some of that color for a street or a sidewalk or whatever you want to call it. And I'm just using a water brush for that. And I'm using a good amount of that pigment. Just wanting to make sure that it's fairly straight. Obviously, I just have an idea in my head on how I want this to look, but the focal point is going to be the image, so I don't care so much about details for this background. I'm going to use some distress inks in the colors Black Soot and Peeled Paint, and then a couple other colors here in a bit. But for my background, I'm going to build I want to paint some buildings. And I started out using my water brush, but then I decided to grab my number 4 flat. No, it's not my number 4. It's a 1/2-inch flat brush. My bad. So it's a 1/2-inch flat brush, and this way I can build those backgrounds or those buildings a little bit easier because of that flat edge. And I'm just going in with that Black Soot distress ink, and I'm building the bases of those buildings. And I'll just keep adding that ink down onto my glass mat. This glass mat makes it really easy to do watercolor with your distress inks, or pretty much any medium you really want to use, because it all wipes off really easily. And then I'll go back in with my water brush, and I'm going to put in a couple of trees. These are not opaque, they're very transparent, so it makes it easy to just push that watercolor off. And again, I don't want this to be a perfect looking background because it's not the spotlight, or it's not supposed to be in the spotlight. It's just supposed to be a background. So I'm not even worried that my tree trunks are black. I don't care about that. The focal point is going to be the image that I stamp. So I'll just put those colors down and just keep adding to try and make it look fairly like a scene, just a very rough scene. And now I'm adding some perspective by putting lines for like a sidewalk. And I think I'm kind of off. The sidewalk should have been one down at the bottom, but whatever. And that'll finish off that part of the scene. Now I'm stamping down my image, and I'm just stamping this onto some Strathmore watercolor paper using VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And then I'm going to actually cover that with the clear embossing powder. I've talked about this before. It's not necessary because the VersaFine is waterproof, but I do like that raised edge because it makes it a little easier when I do decide to watercolor. I don't have to worry about things drying before I slap down color next to color. So I'm just starting off with blue, and this blue is the Faded Jeans Distress Ink, and the red that I have is Barn Door, and I'm just trying to color this mailbox like the mailboxes you see all over America. And it's not perfect, nor is it supposed to be, but this is my focal point. So this is what I'm talking about with the raised edges. I can just go right in with that barn door and paint the sign that's on the mailbox without worrying about the blue bleeding into the red. And then I'll go right back in and try and add a little bit darker shading to the areas where I believe shading would be. And then I'll let that dry. And I'll grab my scene now that things are a little bit more dry, and I'm going to add in some lights, like the building would have lights on. Obviously these are not proportionate. Once again, I don't really care that this background isn't, you know, something perfect. I don't want it to be. And so I'm just slapping down some color. And then I've peeled that off my board. I'm even going to keep that border. I will stamp down my sentiment using that VersaFine Onyx Black ink. I've covered my back with some, not foam tape this time, but actually fun foam. So it'll mail really easy, and fun foam is inexpensive. And then I'm going to put foam tape on the back of my mailbox after I fussy cut that out, and that'll finish off my scene. So I love how this one turned out, but we all know I love a scene. Card number 4 is another scene, but it's just a super easy scene. I have a piece of Nina cardstock that I'm putting into my Mini Misty, and I am going to stamp out just one of the mailboxes along with that really long text. I thought that would be really pretty on there. So I'm just trying to make sure that all my placement is okay. I'll close the door to my Misty, and I'm going to grab Memento Tuxedo Black ink. Originally I had planned to Copic color the mailbox, but you will find that I don't end up doing that because I really liked just the plain white mailbox. I don't know what it was about it. I just really liked it. So I'll stamp that a couple times, and then I'm going to put in a piece of masking paper while I still have ink on my stamp, and then I'll stamp that out, and I will trim that mask out, and then I'll peel off the backing paper and put that over the mailbox. This is almost a 1-layer card because I do end up putting that down onto a card base, but I didn't pop anything up, and that's why we needed the mask, because I plan to do some sponging. And for my sponging, I'm going to use some Vivos makeup brushes. I've talked about these in the past. I really like these. They're nice and subtle and inexpensive, so they do a really good job of doing a soft blend, and for the price, you just can't beat the price. So I started off with some Tumble Glass Distress Ink, and I'm sponging that all over the top part where a sky would be. And I'm using my bigger Vivos makeup brush. I just really do like how easily these blend, and they spread that color really well, really quickly too. And now I'm moving on to some Broken China, and I'm just going to sponge that around the outside. And what you don't see is in between the colors, I'm wiping that off on a microfiber cloth. You don't need water. I just wiped them off. And I'm going back in with that Tumble Glass to make sure that I have a smooth blend, which it already looked fairly smooth before. I'll clean that brush off, and then I'm going to grab a smaller brush, and I'm going to move on to some Twisted Citron is what I'm using here. For grass, sort of, I guess. And I'm just going all over the bottom there, being careful of that mask. And then I'll wipe that off, and I'll grab some crushed olive and just do that all along those edges. And then that'll end my sponging. And this is where I pull off the mask, and I decide to keep that mask. I mean, you can do that if it's not too messed up. And so I'll just stick it on the back of my stamp set and save it for another time. But I'm looking at this, and I really like the way it looks. So I grabbed just some silver shimmer spray, and I spritz that over that. And you can't tell in the video, which is a bummer, because it is really, really shiny. And I really just like the way the white mailbox looks. I don't know, it's different, so I liked it. So I'm just using some liquid glue. I'm going to glue that down to my card base, which is just one of the green cardstocks that came in the kit. And I'll use some of those jewels. Those are the Doris self-stick gems. And I'm just sticking 3 of those down, you know, rule of 3 in art to make it more interesting, I suppose. And I didn't push them down all the way, so they're still moving around. I mean, I can move them around where I want them. And that will finish off card number 4. So easy. And I do like the way that looks. It's really subtle and just pretty, I think. For card number 5, apparently I did not hit the record button, so you're not going to see any footage of that one. But this one, I took one of those card panels and I sponged all around it. I used the colors. In the middle, I used some Salty Ocean, and on the edges, I used Blueprint Sketch. And then I took some Gina K Fancy foils and I ran that through my laminator. And then I took the image that I have there and I stamped that out using Memento Tuxedo black ink, and then I sponged that one as well, and then just used a red Copic on the part there in the middle. I used some foam tape to pop it up, and that was card number 5. I'm really upset that I didn't have the footage for it because I think you guys might have enjoyed that. It was a lot of fun. So I'll probably try and do that technique once again where I just sponge the image because I think that turns out really nice. For the bonus card, I took one of the card panels from the kit and Copic colored in a few spots, and then I used some foils and ran it through the laminator. I attached one of the vellum envelopes from the kit and added a cardstock piece for an added note. I stamped, colored, and fussy cut one of the mailboxes and then attached it with some foam tape. And that finished the bonus card. I really like how this one turned out. So let's go ahead and take a look at the 6 cards that I made for you today, the 4 that I actually showed how you make, and the 2 basic bonus cards, I guess. I would love to know which one of these is your favorite. Do you guys get these kits? Do you like these kits? Is this something you'd like to see me do more in the future? If you like this video, hit the like button, and if you haven't subscribed, please do so because I always have plenty of things planned. And as always, guys, thanks for stopping by.